Leon, when you're ready, if you can read the parable for us one more time.
I'd be happy to. So this time, before I start reading it, I'm going to read the kind of the subtitle of the parable. I kind of wanted to hold that until now to give you a chance to think of it without being influenced in any way at all. But at this point, I think it's helpful. The subtitle, the title is Mind Over Matter. The subtitle is Kill the Ego to Attain True Power and Skill. Kill the ego to attain true power and skill. So as we read through it, one thing is to think about the elements in the story and what they might represent, both as a situation that's painted out in the real world with real people. Another way you can look at it is to really internalize it and think about what these humans, this monk and the young man, and the situation, how they represent what's really happening internally in your own mind. So this is Zen parable, Mind Over Matter, Kill the Ego to attain true power and skill. An accomplished but very conceited young archer once dared a Zen master famed for his prowess in archery to a test of their skills. The youth's proficiency was extraordinary. His first arrow found its target, a far-off bullseye, with ease, and with his next shot, he split the first arrow in two. Think you can match that? He asked the old man condescendingly. Instead of responding, the elderly monk gestured to the young man to follow him higher up the mountain. After some time, they arrived at a deep gorge. An old and decidedly unsteady log spanned the distance to the other side. The master serenely walked to the middle of the log, aimed at a distant tree, and in a clean movement loosed an arrow that flew straight into the tree trunk. "Your turn now," he said, stepping back casually onto the cliff edge. The young man stared into the chasm yawning below and trembled uncontrollably. He could not even put a foot onto the log, much less take aim at anything beyond. The master observed, "You have great control over your bow, but little with the mind that lets loose the arrow."
Thank you, Leon. So now we just open it up. Thoughts, comments, questions, feelings, whatever you want to talk about.
I have a thought that just keeps coming back, and I'm not sure exactly how it ties in, but it's a thing that just kept coming back to me. I'm a teacher. I don't know if I've ever shared that before, but we had a situation not too long ago with a very seasoned teacher and a brand new teacher coming into the team. And I would hear the side of the seasoned teacher, and I don't know exactly how this ties in, but what was going on is the new teacher, because she was better at technology, she thought she knew it all and was basically, felt that she was superior to the seasoned teacher. The seasoned teacher knew that she lacked in the technology department, but she felt she had a lot to bring to the table and nobody would listen to her. And I thought how tragic the whole situation was. And the seasoned teacher ended up retiring mid-year. And in her retirement party, she said, "I think people need to be more open to the knowledge of people that have been around, even if they don't know everything that you know." And I thought, and I think maybe that was the key that kind of why that brought that memory up, because I wasn't close to either teacher. But
I think it really fits. I think it really fits.
Well, I just wasn't quite sure, but it just, to me, I thought gosh, how tragic that you guys couldn't share your strengths with each other.
Mhm.
And really, I was thankful I was not on that team, to tell you the truth.
Mhm.
But that's what this reminded me of mostly. I don't know. Y'all can play with that, I guess.
Good. Thank you, Patty. So before Leon and I make any other comments, I think we just want to open it up. Any other comments or thoughts from Bogdana or Christopher?
I guess from like a more literal perspective, our speech can get us into a lot of trouble. Like, when are we saving like how he did? Yeah. So
That's funny, because I was thinking in my own mind, just like, I wonder, in addition to challenging the master to the contest, what other kind of things did he say? I'm the absolute great. Everybody knows I'm the greatest. Do you want to have a contest? So I could just hear all those things that my own ego plays out, when it's in charge, right?
Good.
I agree with our speech and words give us a lot of troubles, and I would add our judgments to situations or events give us a lot of troubles as well. But I was wondering, what does it mean, or maybe you can tell us a little bit more. I didn't attend the previous class. Kill the ego, exactly.
So that's a good question. We don't want to wade too deep into this, but it's a very broad, and I'm not laughing at you for bringing it up. It's just, we're laughing because we know how slippery it can kind of be. But I'll put out real quick what I think of as ego, and it's really our own creation of this self that we began building from the time we're infants. And as we have experiences in the world, we build this sense of self, right? Would you say that that's on the right track, Alex?
Mhm.
Okay.
Do you want to keep going, or do you want me to pick up?
Go ahead and expound. You go ahead and expound.
All right. So part of the reason why Leon and I laugh is because we could talk about and give lessons about the ego for a whole year and probably still not finish talking about ego. So it's very difficult to answer or to discuss in such a short period.
On a practical level,
Yeah. So
just
on a practical level,
how can we kill the ego in
Yes.
this practical level, having less judgment, not attaching the judgment to our situation, just observer?
so I think if we look at the patterns in Buddhism, and we looked a little bit about this last week when we were talking about right understanding and right thinking. The first step is to simply observe. So if you want to kill the ego, we must understand what ego is and be able to observe it. So here are a few things that can be very helpful in observing the ego. One, you are not born with a sense of self. I'll repeat that again. You're not born with a sense of self. When a child is born, everything is the child, and the child is everything. And the child does not begin to create a sense of self until the brain starts to register that when I touch my face, I'm receiving neural signals from my face and from my hand. But when I touch my mom, I'm only feeling from my hand. And so there is the rudimentary beginnings of the sense of self and other. That's where it begins. So we're not born with a sense of self. We develop it, we grow it, we evolve it over time.
So in the framework of the story, if the young man who's obviously he's the egoistical, right? He's very conceited, right? He thinks he knows everything. He thinks he's the best, like the teacher she was talking about. So if we look at him when he starts the story, you know, he's in this state of mind where I am the best, right? And he goes through this humiliating experience with the master. So when we say kill the ego, what happened is his ego was killed, or it was cut off, or that process of the false idea that I'm somehow separate and better than you. You cut that, you stop that process. You're not really killing part of yourself. So what happened was his experience with the old man stopped that process, that ego of him saying, I'm the best, right? He realized right then, oh no, I'm not. And so another lesson for me is, if you think about any time that we go through this and we're brought back down to earth, that's an opportunity. If we're humble, that's the greatest opportunity to learn, especially from someone who does know more than you. So I just keep imagining, maybe this story went on and he knelt to the master and said, Master, I've learned my lesson, please teach me. And they would go on, and then he could truly become a great archer like the master, right? But his ego was preventing him from learning that, right? He wasn't going to accept anything teaching from him because he was already the best. So I think kill the ego means just to stop that part of your mind from functioning, so that you can really, like Alex says, by observing, just being in touch with reality, what's happening right here and now. So,
and if I can add to that,
please do.
We build a narrative, a story of who we are, of this self, and that's ego. I'm a Buddhist. I'm a Catholic. I work at such and such place. I'm a psychologist. I'm a physicist. I'm an engineer. So we have this, and we define this sense of self. We create this story of who I am. But Buddhism challenges to see, yes, but there's more. And if you want a really clear example of how you are more than the self, ask yourself, where does the self go when you fall asleep? Where does the self go? And yet, if someone comes into the room and wakes you up, you know, you wake up and you're able to reestablish, maybe not at first, but after a little bit, you're able to reestablish your sense of self, right? But the sense of self is not something that is constant 24/7. And yet you continue to exist. So you are more than this idea of self, this narrative, this story that you create about yourself. You are more than that. And we're seeing science supporting that. When we look at what psychologists are researching on self-identity, we are starting to see that there is no self, one singular self, that there's no location in the brain where we can say, oh, there's the self. But what we are seeing is that we have elements of this human being we call the self that arise and unarise given the situation. So we have a sense of self that creates the narrative. We have a sense of self that scans the horizon for danger. We have a sense of self that's a problem solver. We have a sense of self that is aware of body orientation and what things, and where my body is in space and time. And so these things arise and become to take dominance depending on what the situation is. But there is no one self. And that element of self-consciousness disappears when you fall asleep, go under anesthesia. And so that part unarises while other parts may arise. Right? And so the self is more than just the narrative we create, more than the story of I'm the best archer. So he created that narrative. His sense of self that was dependent on being the best archer in the world. And when the Zen master killed that ego, what a blow to my sense of self. Who am I now then? I'm not the best. well, I've been lying to myself all this time. What am I now?
And the chasm represented, fear, uncertainty, death. And the master, because he had truly mastered his mind, was completely calm at facing death. He walked out on the rickety old log as if it was a stone walk, wasn't fazed by it. And so that's really what, when the young man saw that, the old man didn't really have to, say anything to him at all. It was pretty obvious at that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is there any facet of the ego that is healthy for you, or is part of this whole process is getting rid of all those narratives?
It is learning that no self and self can coexist. And so it's not an either or, it's a becoming comfortable with the fact that both exist, that there is no self, but there is a self. And so we have in our philosophy, the way we're educated, we are taught that one cannot exist with the other, that they're opposites.
Right.
But what Buddhism teaches us, and what I am starting to see, is that they both can coexist. So I need a sense of self to be able to do what I'm doing right now, of communicating what I have experienced in Buddhism to you through Zoom. All right. And I have a sense of other that you're there. This is not just a video, that someone's not just pumping a video on my screen of people that don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So there are selves over there that I'm seeing. But there's also an element of no self, which we haven't really touched upon tonight, and I will at some other point, that also exists.
Okay.
So
but if our self is a creation of mind, and it's never any one permanent collection of items, then that makes it empty, because there's no permanence there. Nothing exists permanently.
This is related to, I think it was you, Patty, when we said that you're not the person you were back then.
Right. Yeah.
That's no self. So you are no longer that person, because of things change. Yeah. There's an impermanence. So in that respect, there is no self, because the thing you call yourself right now all of a sudden disappears by the time the sentence finished.
Yeah.
Instead, there's this flow. There's a continuation and evolving, an arising, and it's continuous. This also helps with that fear of death, because when you fear death, that is a fear of the loss of ego. But when you start realizing that ego is not really there, then death holds less power over you. So it's a fascinating, and it takes a while. It's not something that you can just get with the 15 minutes we have here or so, or with one parable. So don't feel frustrated if you don't get it, or you don't fully get it, or it takes time to struggle with it, especially since you've had 20, 30, 40, 50 years working on working under the 30, assumption, or 30, 30, 40, 50. I'll stop at 50. That you have no more, that you've spent all that time with the assumption that there is a self. Yeah. And so all your ideas, all your memories are built on this foundation of self. And when you start pulling that away, it can be a bit unnerving, because you kind of have to reorganize how you view and see the life and the world around you.
The self is what desires things. It wants things. This self is what tries to push unpleasant things away, right? And I kind of think maybe the ego, the self, it's functionally, it's helpful, like we said, to be in this world. We have to live in this real physical world. And so we have to operate by the laws in this world. And so, some level of a central processing area where we can take everything in and analyze it and do the right act, do the proper things. But when we think of that processing process as a permanent self, I think that's where we because then we're taking a snapshot, right? And a snapshot is just one moment in time that's not real.
So can I go as far as extrapolating that whole teacher situation, the frustration between the two of them was really their egos wanting that recognition? And if they had both put that aside, it wouldn't have mattered. Nobody
Look
would
at what
have
they could have learned from each other, right?
yeah.
They could have learned.
So
But our ego is going to defend, I mean, to the last straw, right?
Yeah.
Beyond any kind of reasonable level of approach, your ego is going to actively defend itself all the time and say, no,
here's a
you
good
can't subvert
example
me.
for a teacher. Ego is, am I a good enough teacher, or I am a good teacher?
Yeah.
Egolessness is, I'm teaching so that these children can get better.
Yeah.
And so you've taken this ego, this whole thing, having to build yourself up or tearing yourself down with insecurities, and you focusing on the goal of these children must learn so that they
Which
can
is
have
process.
a better life.
And I think I think that's why I felt when the teacher was coming and confiding me, I just wanted to get away from it. Teachers were feeding it, and I'm just like, I'm not comfortable with this. And I would leave the room as soon as I could. And I think the older I get, the less I want to deal with that stuff. And I don't know if that's wisdom or I don't know, but I can tell you that my soul was like, no, I don't even want to step in this. I don't.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you two are not going to, you're not going to see the value in each other. Then I'm not going to be able to bring the value of you to you. I mean, I can't do that. But yeah, it's frustrating, I guess, in many ways. And then I think about me and your job, and you have a sense of confidence. Is that a little bit of ego? But then when you put it the way you said, my team really looks at it. We're there. We show up to make sure the kids get what the best of us, and hope and pray that they get what they need. Right. And I don't know.
I think confidence was the old master calmly stepping out onto the log.
Maybe
right?
so. Yeah.
That's confidence not born out of ego. That's just confidence born out of knowledge and experience and
lots of
understanding.
And I think that confidence gives you a sense of peace.
Of course it does. Yes, I agree.
And that was what I'm acting to. Like, I got my piece of this, get out of my face.
That's right. You don't have to fight to get anything to make you whole, right?
Yeah. Oh.
And that example you gave of your team and the preparations for the kids, that's a good example of how ego and egolessness can coexist. So you need the egolessness to focus on the children and teaching the children, improving the children's performance. But you also need the ego to be able to self-reflect and say, all right, what skills or knowledge do I lack?
Mm-hmm.
Where's my ignorance? And how do I go about addressing that ignorance so that then I can go back to the egoless goal of the team? So that's the example of them coexisting. Self and no self.
That's
Ego
a
and
healthy ego would defer, whereas an unhealthy ego would say, no, it doesn't. I'm not listening to you. Nothing's going to change my mind.
Mm-hmm. So kill that ego.
Whack.
Any other questions or comments or thoughts? All right. Unless anyone has any burning desire to hear more about ego or in April, I'll sort of just sit with it and see what comes up. But if anyone here really wants to learn more, let me know. Either here.
Post it you can post on the Facebook forum.
Exactly.
Facebook,
right now you can tell
page.
me, or when Leon posts the parable, you can post a comment on the Facebook. Speaking of Facebook, it really helps us if you hit like, or if you view the links. So those things are very helpful for the temple in general. It doesn't help me specifically, but it does help the temple. So if you have a chance, yeah, that'd be great. So our next meeting will be April 7th, and that's going to be in 2 weeks.
So
if
this
you
is a 5 Tuesday month, huh?
Yes. So 5 Tuesday month. And so if you have any questions before then, feel free to email me. If you respond to any of the meetup emails, those emails go directly to me. So that's one quick way to get a hold of me. If you post on the Facebook page, I read those, I think, pretty much daily. And so if you need to get a hold of me through there, you can as well. And if you need my email, then yeah, I will be glad to share that with you either through the Facebook Messenger or through a meetup email when you reply. I'll be glad to send you that.